Here we are again. I'd like to begin by talking about our list here. This is our critical thinkers, intellectual standards. We want to be able to think through a particular filter when it comes to standards, elements of critical thinking, and the traits of critical thinking. So, a good thing to keep in mind as you're moving forward, and more specifically, what are these things? What are these three lists that we have here are groups of terms, right? Words and terms. So the standards basically are what we should be when we're when we're using critical thinking. We need to be clear, accurate, what we're talking about, looking into researching, questioning. The questions need to be relevant. The data, the research, whatever it is that we're looking into needs to be relevant. Needs to be logical, needs to be a proper depth and breadth. Meaning that you're going to look at as big a picture as possible. You can never look at it all. Nobody has that much time or ability. But you want a certain level of understanding, certain level of insight, and a certain level of assurity. Remember, like in a court of law, assurity means preponderance of evidence, not that person is absolutely guilty or not guilty. Usually it's, the preponderance of evidence. What does that mean? Is that 60%, 70%, 80%? Probably around that's ballpark, 60 to 80%, somewhere in there at least, right? And if you could be 90% sure, then you're ahead of the game, right? Needs to be precise. Your thinking needs to be precise. Your questions need to be precise. Your thinking needs to be precise, right? Significant. Needs to be complete. That's part of your comprehensive package, right? Looking at things as comprehensively as possible, all possible options. And I have an example that I can use in a moment. Fair? Are you being fair? Right. So that's the 10 standards right there. Then over here we've got the 8 elements of critical thinking. What do we use? Are elements or tools? I think I would rather call them tools. Looking at purpose, questions, using questions, looking at point of view. You've got information to use to look into. In your research, you infer from what you know and from what you've learned. You're going to synthesize your existing knowledge with found knowledge or that which you've researched, right? And then make an inference. What what does that lead you to believe? What do you infer from what you've just studied, analyzed, researched, data, synthesized your knowledge with found or researched knowledge, right? Concepts, implications, assumptions. So those are kind of your tools. Um, Elements that you'll be using to apply critical thinking to your problem, right? And then finally, you've got the human element. These are you. This is about you. This is the like YouTube. This is a guru of you, as I tell my clients. Um, you want to be humble, autonomous. What does that mean? Like an automatic stick shift, right? You generally want to be as above the fray. I talked about this before. As independent and as unencumbered by emotion, preconceived notions, biases, prejudices, so forth and so on, right? Autonomous as possible. If you don't know what any of these words mean, I would suggest that, the ones you're not clear on or need a little more clarification, look them up. Try to get it squared away in your mind's eye. That's what I do. I'll look up something, in this case, a definition or a terms or words, and I'll look at the definition and I'll really pass it through my mind. I put it into my mind in my own words. What is that? And then I try to visually see it. You know, what exactly is that definition? I think what they're saying is, do I have it right? Then I look back at the original definition. I said, yeah, I think that's it. And then I keep trying to, what's the word I'm looking for? Prove that my definition, prove my definition through looking at the word and the additional times or usages the word is put through when I'm reading, studying, and see, keep checking it to make sure that I've really got the definition down pat, right? Integrity, that's, moral, ethical. Courage, if you're truly autonomous, you're courageous because you are maybe going against the norm, or maybe going against the group, or maybe opposing. There might be one group out there that is really looked down upon by general consensus or something. But you courageously look through that, bypass that, just go, well, forget that for a moment. Extreme hate, bias, prejudice, leaning in whatever direction, right? Just forget it. Pretend it doesn't exist for a minute, right? And then try to look at your options, or what you're really looking at as you study, right? Am I covering it from all angles? Have I got a particular bias coming from a particular group, preconceived notion, point of view bias from a particular group, or am I thinking as independently, as autonomous, as courageously? That's tough to do. That's real. There are people out there that do that. They're few and far between, but those are our heroes, right? Persevere. If you don't know, just don't stop and make something up. Well, I really don't know. Looks like I'm mostly right, so I'll go with that. No, I'm probably going to have to stop and do some more research, more reflecting, put my ultimate answer or judgment on hold until I get more information, or whatever you need more of. Are you reasoning it out well? Do you have empathy? And that's kind of looking at point of view, looking at other people's points of view. That's hard to do too, right? Say you're a Christian and you find that same-sex marriages or same-sex relationships oppose the very fabric of your of the Bible, one of the tenets of the Bible. Man shall not sleep with man. Now, what does that actually mean? The Bible itself has been rewritten many times. They didn't have a printing press way back in the day. So in order to make a copy of the Bible, you had to do it by hand. Monks copying, one copying, another copying, another. So mistakes were made. Maybe biases or prejudices were put into the Bible. I'm not saying it's totally off, but there are things in there. Misquoting Jesus is a good book to read about, And if you think it through, it makes sense, right? Because these were humans, or individual humans, who were I don't want to say interpreting, but rewriting the Word of God. And did the originals, the three Gospels, did the prophets get their understanding of God's message correctly? Right? I don't know. I'm not saying yes or no, but I don't know, because I know human beings are not fail-safe, right? So maybe they didn't quite get the interpretation right from God, or what he was implying, if you believe there is a God, that he spoke to the prophets, right? Ancient prophets. That's a problem. There's also a problem of now it's written down in a book. We need more copies of the book. So it needs to be rewritten, copied by hand by scholars or monks or whomever. And mistakes are made, intentional or not, whatever, right? So humans, if you could show me any human who is error free in their thinking or in their writing or their interpreting, right? Or in their copying. I copy stuff all the time. I write all the time. I'm a highly educated, highly trained individual who really is attentive to detail, but I make mistakes too, right? Who doesn't? Everybody does. If you're human, you make mistakes. So just something to keep in mind. Let's get to make sure I'm sharing that properly. All right, so we left off on page 66. There was an example here. I think it was Jack and Jill, right? Jack and Jill example. It's been a while since at least a week since I sat down. So we're going to see if we can get through maybe, we got from page 57 to 66, 67, right? So we'll see if we can get another 10 pages in here roughly. Because it's gonna take 3 videos. So maybe up to page 77 or so, something like that. How the parts of thinking fit together. The trick to learning the elements of thought, which I just went over, is to express these ideas in a number of ways until their dynamic interrelationships become intuitive to you. Didn't I just say that? Right? So when you're studying or learning, one and the same, oftentimes, right? When you're studying or learning, you don't just watch one video, listen to one person, watch one book, study it, memorize, you're done, right? No. When I went through, and I talked about this before, I went through multiple disciplines because I thought I was inspired, a kind of vague inspiration at first, but then it became more evident or clear to me why I was doing that. Because as a coach, as a teacher, as a concerned human being, American citizen, I wanted to get a pretty good understanding of the basic discipline, right? Math, science, why are they so popular? And I found out that it's basically um, innovation, scientific innovation that drives our economies. So I always say, when you're wondering why things are important, go to the money. You know, so there's usually a money factor involved when people put a lot of emphasis on something like in school. Is there a lot of money in the arts, in shop, in home ec, in gym class? Well, maybe gym class if you're like the upper 1%, you can become a great athlete, make millions, but that's very, very rare. Um, Languages, are they really looked at as, if you do well in languages, are you an all-star? If you do well there? No, it's usually math and science. First of all, they're hard, right? Chemistry, biology, trigonometry, algebra, geometry, and then moving on. I've gone all the way up to calculus. I was almost going to teach math at one point. I was really good at it. I was a computer programmer, systems analyst. But then I got to about 30 years of age and I said, man, I want to do this the rest of my life. And I switched. I went to away from the tougher disciplines to what some may say are the softer disciplines, and English and so forth, liberal arts. For some people, that's a curse word, liberal arts or a curse word. But you can do a lot with it. And you can use your left brain, your more creative brain, with your right brain, your more logical brain, math and science, with your language and art type of brain. And that's what I use them both. So yeah, express them in a number of ways. So you got to keep. When I was studying, for instance, I read several books on theology, philosophy, economics, history, American history specifically, ethics, and so forth. Right now, I went through several, maybe 10, 11, 12, maybe up to a dozen disciplines over a period of 10, 11, 12 years. Just to kind of get a general feel or background for what's going on in these major fields of study, right? That's what I did. Probably a totally nerd thing to do, but anyway, there it is. But to tell you the truth, it's really helped me. It's helped me amazingly well. in my research, in my writing, in my coaching, in my teaching, and all, I mean, it's almost across the board in other areas of life as well, doing all that reading and researching. So what I found, I read a book, for instance, economics. I read one book on economics, and you think you're done. Read a book on, basic, like common sense economics. You think you're done with that? Okay, I'm done. I read one book. I'm done. No, you have to probably read 4, 5, 6, or 7. I read at least 6, maybe 7. And to get a real look, there's one author, and geez, I'm forgetting his name right now. But he talked about the fact that there are 9 different philosophies, economic philosophies, 3 for free markets and 3 for socialist uh, economics, socialist markets, or centralized markets, I should say, centralized economic philosophy, probably a better way to say it. And then there's free markets, right? So, and he said, probably the people who are not experts have a better chance of being right because they're not filtering what they're seeing through one point of view, a particular philosophy. When actually there's credence and credibility to all those philosophies, depending on what you're using, how you're using them, how you're looking at your problem, and so forth, right? Again, I don't know. I haven't used all 9. I'm no expert, but I'm just going with what the experts say. And other experts have said similar things, so I believe them, right? Anyways, so the trick to learning elements or learning anything is express these ideas in a number of ways or read about them through a number of textbooks or, I don't know, read several definitions, multiple definitions, those sources, because when you look up the definition of a word, you'll notice that not all dictionaries have the same definition, right? One way to express those into relationships. Oops, let me go back. For example, you might think of the parts of reasoning as analogous to the essential parts of the human body. See, analogies, that's another way to learn. Uh, Analogies, metaphors, similes, right? And that's why we use them in the English language to help people. Christ, the great philosophers, Christ, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nietzsche, Kant, all the great thinkers and philosophers throughout time. Even Einstein was a great philosopher, believe it or not. When they think, they reason things out or try to express what they're talking about, they use analogy, right? I, as a teacher, do the same thing, probably on a much less effective scale than those individuals. But reasoning is analogous to the essential parts of the human body. They are all present whether we are healthy or not. Like the parts of the body, the parts of thought function in an interdependent fashion. One way to express those interrelationships is that. So interrelationship means that they're connected, right? Your purpose affects the manner in which you ask questions, right? So you've got to really think these things through. What is your purpose? My purpose is to express my bias and my hate and my prejudice for fill in the blank, right? Uh, what did I say one time? Say, for instance, somebody is anti-Republican and they put out a survey and they ask questions. Do you think that the vile, corrupt, mean, malicious, grifter President Bush was a good president? Right. Well, man, geez. I guess you summed it up there for me. Thanks. I'm done. Right. So you don't want to go that direction. Right. You want to be fair-minded. You want to be independent. You want to be brave and courageous and clean, brave, reverent, kind of all the Boy Scout, Girl Scout thing. The manner in which you ask questions affects the information you gather. That's true. So when surveys are taken or polls are taken, how those questions are asked, just as I did there with mine was an exaggeration. But when polls are taken or when surveys are taken, you got to really don't just look at the results. Look at the question. Well, how were the questions posed? Right? Very important, but people just ignore that. They're lazy. They want to quick, especially if the information or the output or the outcomes are in line with their thinking, their prejudice, bias, whatever, preconceived notion. Oh yeah, that's how I think, so they must be right. Careful on that one. Uh, the information you gather affects the way you interpret it. There you go. The way you interpret information affects the way you conceptualize it. The way you conceptualize information affects the assumption. The assumptions you make affect the implications, right? The implications follow through your thinking, affect the way you see things, your point of view. Very, very important. So thinking is critical thinking or thinking in general. Thinking well, logically, rationally, thoroughly, humbly, courageously, right? All those critical thinking terms, right? It's difficult. It's hard to do, man, especially if you have an axe to grind. Oh, I'm a Democrat and I hate fill in the blank Republican, right? Or I'm a Republican, I just hate all Democrats. Whatever. There's a lot. I was on Reddit. You know, Reddit. So the what is that? That's like social media, isn't it? Right? I was on there and I was reading the responses, and it was really nasty. You know, I won't tell you of which particular opinion or mindset or angle they were coming from, but my gosh, it was kind of like, are these bots? Is this fictitious? Is this a prank? Are there really people out there in such large groups that think so warped in such a warped way, with such bias and prejudice and hate and so blindly? I was just like, I deleted that thing. I didn't want it to infect my. That's another thing. Stay away from things that are going to infect your thinking, your well-being, your intellect, your spirit, your emotions. Right? Avoid. You know, if it's bad, it's just like disease. You want to avoid diseases, physical diseases. Right? Avoid mental diseases. That'll be good. Right? Mental diseases, emotional diseases, spiritual diseases. In the remainder of this chapter, we gave a more detailed account of concepts, assumptions, inferences, implications, point of view. There you go. Good. Right. So most of us cannot just read something once, read definitions, right? And we're done. We need, that's why you have 5 parts of an essay. You have the title, you have the intro and thesis, what kind of get you off the ground. Intro gives you background. Title and thesis kind of give you the backbone of the essay, what you're talking about, right? What's the main point? What are you getting at? That type of thing, right? Then the middle section develops that idea to make it more clear through evidence, examples, statistics, facts, charts, expert statements, and so forth, right? So it's this going over. I read a brief flyer in the mailroom in one of the colleges I was working at, and it was from the education department. And it said, in order to really learn something well, you need to go through it 20 times. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't go through most. Most of what I learned, I don't go through. Maybe eventually, but to really have a solid foundation and say, I'm pretty good. I'm good to go. I can definitely learn more and keep adjusting as I move forward. Sure, sure. But I'm good to go. I can open my mouth on this stuff now without looking like a fool, right? That type of thing. Right? I would probably say like 6 or 7 times, just like those books. If I want to read about economics, understand economics, the basics of economics, I'm going to read 5, 6, 7 books, not 20. If I read 20 books on each thing I was trying to learn about, or discipline in this case, I wouldn't have time for anything else. Anyways, direct special attention to the distinction between inferences, assumptions, and assumptions, because we find that students often have difficulty distinguishing these two initially. Now I will give you my example. There's been the news, tariffs have been in the news a lot lately. And there's a lot of misunderstanding on how tariffs work. Again, I am no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but as a pretty solid, good critical thinker, I'm probably at least stage 5. I kind of fluctuate maybe between stage 5 and 6, expert critical thinker, expert thinker, right? Maybe sometimes I go down to 3 and 4 when I'm lazy or stupid or not quite filled in yet. Or maybe I jump the gun or assume too much or whatever. We all make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. And because of that, I think we should be much more forgiving. Right? Judge not, lest ye be judged. I remember my Catholic school, Catholicism, what was it? Catechism. Judge not, lest ye be judged. And somebody said, what the heck does that mean? Well, if you're judging people, that means you're probably perfect, right? The great judge is allegedly, for those who believe or want to believe, is perfect, right? God, maybe Christ. But if you're out there making judgments, you're immoral, you're lazy, you're da 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 da. What is that? I always say when you're pointing at other people, one finger out, 3 back, right? So you may be pointing, yeah, you, and that, but what about me? Well, me, I ain't perfect. I'm full of contradictions. I'm full of hypocrisies. Why? Because I'm human. I forget things. I make mistakes. I have bad days. Right? You got to relax, have a sense of humor. Don't be so serious, and don't try to always, rage about things. Rage into the good night. So what was I looking at? The tariffs. So as regards tariffs, there was a statement being made. It's a terrible idea. They're dirty. Tariffs are dirty. And again, that's kind of a generic statement, a generic analysis. What does that mean? And I guess Trump, the Supreme Court voted 6-3 to negate the tariffs, or there were certain statutes or acts in place that Trump was following that he was allegedly didn't follow to the. And they're also saying that the decision on tariffs goes through Congress, right? Doesn't go through Supreme Court, doesn't go through the executive or the president. It goes through Congress. How tariffs are to be managed and used and so forth, right? But anyways, they were limiting his use of tariffs in a particular way. And this individual was saying, I'll get to that point in a minute. But he was saying that basically, Trump is now going to have to refund all those billions of dollars, right? What is it? 200, $300 billion, some record number of record revenue, a revenue rate of 16.8% or something like that, which hasn't been reached in 100 years. So making massive revenue or income for our government, for the country, pay back bills. And supposedly, allegedly, this is, again, you have to do more research. I haven't done a lot of research on this, but just enough not to be struck down dumb. Okay, I can talk about it relatively intelligently. I'm ahead of the curve for 90% of people, but then you've got the experts who can give me more insight, right? So allegedly, by the end of Trump's term, if the tariffs stayed in place, they would basically, revenue would be like something like $1.3 trillion. That's a lot of money. That sounds good to me. But anyways, so this individual was saying, oh, those tariffs are all taxes passed on to the consumer. That's dirty. That's evil. That's wrong. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, that's how they work. Big deal. That's how they work. What you do is there's literally millions of products or markets out there, right? So what the tariffs do is that they're strategically applied, right? There's certain goods, not goods and products, that are not troublesome, but they're necessary and needed by the United States. Like maybe coal, steel, fuel, building materials, all very important, right? Especially the government's responsible for, keeping the country going, keeping jobs, keeping people homed and houses, and keeping people employed and all that stuff. The purse strings belong to Congress. Right? What else was there? So, what the strategy on tariffs is that these countries, there's a lot of Nancy Pelosi in 1994. There's a video out there was talking about unfair tariffs from China and just outright outlandish abuse of the United States of tariffs, right? Creating all kinds of revenue and jobs for China, but limiting us. Right? And Trump, I remember Trump's been talking about that for like what, 3 decades at least, right? China, China, China. That's why he talks about China a lot. Right? So unfair trade imbalance, unfair trade practices. Anyway, so what he did was jacked up the tariffs. Tariffs are nothing more than a tax on imports. So when China or Europe or Canada sends goods to us, the tariffs are a tax that they have to pay for. You think they're going to pay for it? No. They're going to pass that tax on to the consumer of the country that the product is being sent to. So yes, the Americans will have to pay higher prices, but that's good. Because then what they'll do is not pay, and this is also got to do with security. The tariffs are being used for security purposes as well. I'll tell you about that in a second. But anyways, so those products will have a higher price tag that are passed on to the U.S. consumer. But what the U.S. consumer will do instead, too expensive, I'm going to buy domestic. And that's something that the unfair person who was not a fair-minded thinker just totally ignored, didn't think about, didn't care, right? I've got something here that looks like I can attack the guy I hate. Let's not think beyond that, right? But I said, wait a minute, I gotta know some stuff about tariffs. Let me look into this a little bit more, And I'm not saying I'm pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'm just saying I'm pro proper message, right? I'm pro honest thinking, fair-minded thinking. Anyway, I'm telling this to my students the other day, yesterday, in my critical thinking class, as a matter of fact, right? So, yeah, so they'll buy domestic, they'll buy more of those products, and which will bring in more money for the country and create more jobs and so forth. So positive effect, right? And it also, if, for instance, we buy a lot of technology from overseas, Japan for sure, but China as well, circuit boards and things like that that run mostly military that the government is concerned about. So they're really careful about those products, right? So Trump jacked up the cost on certain circuits, the technical computer parts basically that run our tanks and planes and whatever. So jacked up the price on those, and then people are going, well, we don't want to buy those. We'll buy domestic. Or it will force the United States to create those products domestically, right? So there's a more honest look at the tariffs, you know, whether or not they're good or bad. And again, I don't know all the particulars of it. Allegedly, Trump said the other day that, yeah, I've been struck down. There were certain statutes or acts that he was following that he's just going to circumvent those, and I'll be able to apply just as high tariffs, if not higher tariffs, using other methodologies, right? Other statutes and whatnot. So I don't know. I don't know what the courts are doing. It's all political, but anyways, there you go. So that's kind of what's going on. And I'm giving a more honest appraisal, an assumption of the situation than somebody who's, looking at it from just a bias, attack perspective. Put the book down periodically and see whether you can elaborate on the elements of thought in your own words. Didn't I just say that? That is a great way to do it. Because you want to put it in your own words, so therefore that's education. You really know it organically. You're not just memorizing, cold calling, or memorizing definitions and dates and facts, right? That's okay. But you really want to know it organically. If I understand it, just like when I have my students peer review a paper, put the thesis in your own words and then say it back to the student whose paper you're looking at, right? I think what you're saying with this thesis is in my own words is, yeah, that's it, right? Oh, you got it. Okay, good. I understand. I comprehend, right? Success in these acts of active elaboration will make the concepts yours. That's what I. That's why this book, one of the greatest books, teaching tool, really, even I've ever used. Relationship between the elements, because the elements do not exist in isolation, but rather in relation to each other, interrelated. Right. You must not think of the distinctions between them as absolute. The distinctions are always relative. Right. True. Absolutes, as I tell my students, absolutes rarely happen. Right. Even Stephen Hawking said about most theories, especially those of relative complexity, not gravity. Gravity exists. Look, prove me wrong. Right? I just dropped it. It fell. Not something as simple as that, but more complex. Theory of relativity or quantum theory and so forth. Uh, Stephen Hawking says, and Einstein too, both of them. Some of the couple of the biggest brains in science ever. That no theory is absolute. We're not done. Why? Because there's almost an endless amount of information. Scientists have said over the years that, the more I study, the more I research, the more answers I get to questions, the more questions come up, right? And Stephen Hawking said that's one of the great thrills of science. Just endless questions. It goes on and on. If he likes that, he likes confusion. He likes the open-endedness of it. That's good. That's a healthy way to think of it, especially if you're human, right? You're not a god. You're never going to know it all, see it all, understand it all. So accept your plight. That's good critical thinking right there, right? Be honest. That's fair-minded. Right? The point is that it's important to recognize an intimate overlap, interesting word, intimate overlap among all the elements by virtue of their relationships. That is underlined. I didn't put that underline there. But anything that's underlined, italicized, anything that is highlighted, comes in a bullet list, that stuff's important. Okay? Critical thinkers think to some purpose. You do not reason without having something you are trying to accomplish. There you go. Be careful about what you're trying to accomplish. I'm not saying you have to be an angel or a saint, right? But that would be good. That'd be close to what you need to be. But it's difficult. It's difficult. Critical thinking, being honest, fair-minded, unbiased, looking at other people's point of view, having empathy and compassion for all, especially if I hate rich people. I hate fill in the blank political party. I hate such and such fans. I hate Red Sox fans. I hate Dodger fans. Or I hate Toronto Blue Jays. So, why do you hate those fans? Well, probably you hate those fans. I found out being a big fan for a long time, for many decades. The reason why people hate fans of a particular team is that particular team has done them dirty. Right? It's probably dominated their team. I hate those fans. Right? And anything that those fans say that's positive about that team that has beaten their team just rubs them the wrong way. Even if it's not that negative or nasty, they're still this. Those Yankee fans, those Red Sox, there's two groups that don't like each other. Right? You do not reason without having something you're trying to accomplish, without having some aim in view. When you think about the world, you do not do so randomly, but rather in line with your goals, desires, needs, values. What are your goals? What do you desire? Right? This is your agenda, right? What do you need? Well, I really need I really need those Yankees to lose, or Red Sox, and value. Right? Much of what we are after in our thinking is not obvious to us. This is one of the reasons why we are our own worst enemies. Because there's a lot going on in our thinking that goes unlabeled, unrecognized, and unobserved. And we don't really want to think about it, so we ignore it. We kind of have a vague feeling about what's going on. And we do say certain things that are vaguely attached to our desires, needs, goals, values. Right? But sometimes we don't think about it. Why do I hate such and such so much as a team, or oppose a particular party so much? Right? Much of what we're after in our thinking is not obvious to us. Raising human goals and desires to the level of conscious. So this is subconscious stuff, the stuff that's not obvious to us, right? You've got to raise the subconscious to the conscious, not the unconscious. That stuff is buried deep and down you, and it's probably buried deep down you, and it's down inside you because it's related to some trauma, and you probably have to go to therapy or get hypnotized, hypnotherapy, pull it out. And once you face it, it could be frighteningly dangerous in its revelations, right? That's why people don't like going to the shrink. Raising human goals and desires to the level of conscious realization is an important part of critical thinking. Too. So that's again, that's a part of being courageous, right? It's to think well and to really look at ourselves and examine our own shortcomings, bias, prejudice, so forth. It ain't easy. It's hard, difficult. You might be going to college simply because all your friends are. Oh, yes. There was a motivational individual, I forget his name, might come to me in a moment. And he said, he called it the greatest secret or something like that. The greatest secret, unknown to most people, is the reason why most people do most things in regards to career work, is that they're just following like lemmings, right? My father has worked there. My mother has worked in that field for so long. My friends go there. I heard the teacher say, just go to the job. Or maybe my president has said, or I believe I've heard a bunch of times. Yeah. So you're just following. You're not really doing what you want to do at the core, your basic needs and desires, tapping in on your very talents and gifts and desires, your innate, what you bring with you, right? You're not tapping into that. You're tapping into external stuff, right? I'm going to become an accountant because my mom and dad and I've come from 3 generations of accountants, right? Or I'm going to go into STEM field because that's where the money is. Yeah, but are you a science, technology, engineer type of person? You might not be, right? In this case, you have not thought seriously about your purpose. Most people don't. Most people spend a lifetime not really knowing themselves. You are far more likely to achieve an end when you know, here, let's try it again. You are far more likely to achieve an end when you know exactly what you are trying to achieve. And that's why I always talk about definitions. You really got to, you can't just vaguely pretend you know it or imagine you know it, right? Like those 3 lists, the term list that I started with. You really, really, really got to know those things so that you have specific labels that you can use, that you can utilize in being a critical thinker, a good critical thinker, right? Not just a low level critical thinker, a top notch, maybe a 5 or 6 level thinker. One problem with human thinking is that people sometimes pursue contradictory ends. Oh yes, we're at what do they say? Contradictory purpose. For instance, you might want to become educated, but also want to avoid doing intellectual work. You might want others to love you, but not behave in loving ways towards them. Right? Oh, isn't that true? We're full of contradictions and doubts and fears and hypocrisy, right? Careful. Sloppy thinking, sloppy life, unfulfilled, unhappy life. Careful, be careful. As it says here, be careful, therefore, not to assume that your purposes are consistent with one another or that your announced purposes are your actual purposes. I've taught from numerous, I don't want to say a lot, but from numerous critical thinking texts, at least 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe a dozen over the years. This is the best one by far. Because it's not just teaching critical thinking, it's psychology, right? It's really getting to the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is you or me, the individual, right? What's going on in there? What's going on in there? In here, right? What's going on in there? We got to really look at it, examine it, take it apart, right? Like a doctor did, or like a surgeon, or like mechanic. I got to take it apart and look at it, look at all the parts, all the interrelated parts, and really see what's going on, what's wrong. Further, the purposes you pursue influence and are influenced by your point of view. This is just great stuff. And the way you see the world, yes, your purposes shape how you see things, and how you see things shapes what you see. Oh my God. This is just perfection. Can you have perfection? Critical thinkers take command of concepts. Concepts are like the air we breathe. They are everywhere. Although they are essential to living a human life, people rarely notice them. Notice again, this is underlined. Key, big points. Yet only when you have conceptualized a thing in some way can you think about it. Nature does not give you instruction in how things are to be conceptualized, right? Yeah. You must create ideas alone or with others. Once you do so, you integrate concepts into a network of ideas because no concept stands alone. Just buy this book, read it over and over and over again. I've gone through this maybe, it's relatively new. As I told you, I retired and I took about a year and a half off for health reasons. Funny, my wife said that a lot of people who retire, when they retire, all of a sudden run into health problems. I go, that's not true. Then I retire, right there, smacked into some health problems. It took me about a year to overcome. Anyways, but fortunately, when you retire, you have to wait 6 months at least before you can work again, right? That's the way it goes, at least in higher learning in academia. What else? If you want to develop as a critical thinker, you must come to terms with this human power of the mind, create concepts through which you see and experience the world, because it is precisely this capacity of which you must take charge to significantly develop as a thinker. Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Oh, so much, yes. To figure out the proper use of words, this is diction. There's a lot of words out there. A lot of people don't understand a lot of words. Again, dictionary should be your friend. You should look up every word and really understand the definition, right? I look up words and I know words, and then I kind of get vague on it because we're very forgetful people. Over time, our memory just kind of fades on certain things. We can't remember everything perfectly clearly. So we have to go back and review, right? That's why at the beginning of each chapter, I review. For me, for the student, for humans, because we're fallible, right? You know, our brain, what do they say? Read about your brain too and how poor of a learning device it is, right? The research has been done on this by brainiologists, or those who study the brain and how it works. That within, you read something, just read something, say a chapter for your class tomorrow, and put it aside. You've read 25, 30 pages, put it aside. Within one day, you're going to forget 80% of that if you don't review. Good Lord, who designed this thing? It's a terrible processor. It's terrible at taking in information, understanding it, recalling it correctly. It's also been shown that a lot of times over a period of time that we will oftentimes have an experience or understand something, learn about it, or maybe just have an experience. Something happens to us one day, or we read about something, or we learn something. And then as the time passes, we start superimposing things on top of that. Just, you know, we hear something on radio, somebody says something, we just superimpose that on what we've learned or experienced. And then that stuff becomes a part of our experience. Oh yeah, you know what happened to me? And half of that, what you talked about, happened to you. The other half just happened to somebody else on a radio show and you superimposed it. This is stupid. This is how dumb we are, right? It's terrible. I'm frightened of my own stupidity. Yeah, so you got to be aware of it. It all starts with awareness, isn't that what they say? And then go from there to fix it. To figure out, and there are things you can do, little mnemonic devices and memory aiding tools and things to realize, right? So that you can fix those things, improve upon those fallibilities of the mind of human nature. To figure out the proper use of words, the proper way to conceptualize things, events, situations, emotions, and abstract ideas, you first want to achieve true command of the uses of words. What did I say? Right? Because if you really understand words and their definitions, and these words are nothing more than terms that you apply to your thinking, right? Right? And the better you are with diction or word choice, the more accurate you can be, the better. For instance, if a crowd is aggressively rushing the stage, you say, the crowd, the group rush the stage. What's a better word? Mob. Mob is an aggressive group of people. So now you've got a more accurate appraisal, description, and communication of what's going on. So you're not only helping others, you're helping yourself to be more accurate in your thinking and your recalling and your comprehending, right? And you're inferring or whatever, right? That's why really well-studied people are better thinkers. They've exercised the brain. They got a six-pack on their brain, right? It comes down to. You can't become really smart or a good thinker just by sitting there, or hoping what I was born with will be enough and now I'm good to go. No, not at all. No, barely. Indoctrination. There you go. Often people misuse or confuse ideas because of their indoctrination, or they've been gaslit. What's that word up? Into a social system, resulting in a distortion of their experience. Oh, so much of that going on. I read a lot of, every day I get my MSN, Microsoft news, and I read through it and I see kind of generally what's going on. I might spend maybe 10, 15 minutes, if there's something really interesting, maybe 30, 40 or more minutes, and just to stay informed. As a free American citizen, making choices, being able to vote, right? And being on the effect side of those decisions. What's the effect on me, on us, right? I want to know. You don't want people in power locally, city-wise, or city level, state level, federal level, international. Can't control that, but you want to make sure that the best people are in place in a representative government, right? They represent us. That's why there's term limits, so to speak, even though some have been in government for way too long. But that's why there's term limits. That's why there's impeachments, right? That's why there's recall. Now, that person did us dirty. Time to get rid of that president, governor, congressperson. As a rising critical thinker, you must continually distinguish the concepts and ideas implicit. What does that mean? Implied in your social conditioning, from the concepts and ideas implicit in the natural language you speak, right? Oh boy, that's good, right? That's tasty. People from many countries and cultures speak the same natural language. The people of Canada, there's your example there. Mostly they implicitly share the same set of concepts. Nevertheless, people in these countries may be socially conditioned to use language in very different ways. True, yes. Life is very complicated, isn't it? So it's not good to be lazy. It's not good to be ignorant. It's not good to not study this stuff and learn this stuff and work on this stuff and improve upon this stuff so you can be a more effective human being for yourself, for your family, for your community, for your city, state, nation, world. I don't know how far you want to take it. How responsible and accountable and magnanimous, there's a good word for you, are you, right? Are you just going to sit around, sit on your fat butt all day, play video games, text, get on social media, watch sports? That might be okay for a while. But then when you become an adult, you get into your mid-20s, 30s, it just doesn't fly. For me, it didn't. What is more, a person from China, Tibet could learn to speak the English language fluently without any sense of sharing in the same social conditioning. Yes. Yes, because there's certain terminology that are germane or specific to the culture, right? And some of that terminology is very foreign, not only in its basic definition and understanding, but also in its cultural norms and references to other countries or to foreigners, right? Well, that was a good statement you made there. That's ballpark, Bob. That's a ballpark statement. And then, somebody from China that's a ballpark. Maybe China, not Japan. Japan is really into baseball, so they would probably know what that means. That's a really ballpark concept. You got going there. That's a ballpark, Bob. Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Yeah. What does that really mean? And that's kind of a soft example, but there's harsher, more profound examples. But anyway. Nevertheless, because we are socialized to believe that we are, as a people, are free, reasonable, just, and caring, we assume that our behavior matches what these words imply. And you can get certain groups, certain social groups, certain cultural groups, certain political groups, certain socioeconomical groups, so certain business groups that think, I am the reasonable one. Our group, we're the chosen people. Each. How many religions are there in the world? There's actually about 600 religions. There's six major ones, 600 altogether. And even of those, like Christianity, even in Christianity alone, there are thousands of sects, sects, or reinterpretations of the scriptures. The Nicene Creed, what is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost? It's all one person. It's three separate beings. It's two beings. It's nothing. Or for some people, that doesn't exist. No such thing as God. There's nobody. Uh, there's no human or godlike being floating around, sitting on a cloud up there. You guys are nuts. I'm an atheist or whatever, right? So there's all these belief systems out there. A lot of different belief systems, a lot of different points of view. And because those are human, and you're not the king. May the king be the king of your castle, but you're not the king of even your town or city. We don't have those things, right? So, man, you got to allow difference. You say it. You got too many. If you're overly prejudiced or biased, that racism thing. Yeah, I think racism was around just because it's easy. There's too many people out there, things and ways of thinking that are different. We'll just go with mine, and let's destroy anyone who doesn't think like. There we go. Even if it's unreasonable or illogical or selfish, yeah, whatever. I'm happy. That's all that matters. So I think that racism is really about selfishness, isn't it? Nothing could be more selfish than. And it keeps you, attacking other cultures or races keeps you in power, doesn't it? Power, money, influence. Isn't that politics? Fundamental contradictions or inconsistencies in our lives like this frequently go unquestioned. True. As we become caught in the words being used rather than looking at the actual behavior being exhibited. Yeah, we really don't think deeply, critically. Most of us don't think critically or think well most of the time. Most of the people, most of the time, most situations don't think well. And this is a problem. This is a problem. Big problem. This is part of the self-deceptive tendencies to which the human mind is prone. Critical thinkers learn how to strip off surface language and consider alternative ways of thinking, talking about realities. That's what I did with those tariffs, right? I go, I don't know, there's something that seemed too easy. The tariffs are dirty. The cost of those products, uh, which are a tax applied to the products being imported, all passed on to the American citizen. Tariffs are dirty. Tariffs are evil. Trump's evil. Done. I went, nothing's that clean. Nothing's that straightforward. Believe me. As a critical thinker, that's where you become skeptical. I'm not going, I totally doubt what he's saying. And what he was saying is correct. What he said, yes. Prices are increased. That increase of the price on tariffs, higher tax on tariffs for those importing, is to be paid by those who are importing, the foreigners, right? But as is the case in most cases, they'll say, well, I don't want to pay it. I'll pass it on to the consumer. And he was 100% right about that, but he was missing. That's the tip of the iceberg, right? Wasn't being honest, wasn't being thorough, wasn't being comprehensive, wasn't being brave, wasn't being fair-minded. Nasty. There's some dirty thinking. So it's funny that he's deriding these dirty tariffs while he's being dirty. I got him. Guy just thought of that. I got him. Oh, wow, that made me happy. Sadly, that made me happy. Not that I'm getting, not that it's a gotcha moment, but that it's, getting to the core of the problem. That's what we want. As a critical thinker, you will learn how to think sociologically. Yeah, I said that right. And thus how to recognize when your ideas are controlled, yes, by social rituals, expectations, and taboos. Oh, that's good. Man, most of this stuff we should just make all of these things that I've highlighted into tattoos. And we're just going to tattoo them all over each other. Bob, could you turn around again? What was that point about? Oh, yeah, that's on the upper right side of your back there. Let me just like, do I have that on me anywhere? No, I don't. So let me, can I use it? Look, can I use you as a reference source? You just have these tattoos like a race car with all this information over it, all of it, all the time. We can self-reference it, or maybe look at the other person if we can't access it on ourselves. Critical thinking sets information. You cannot reason without using some set of facts. Data experiences as an essential part of our thinking. True. Finding trustworthy sources, key point. Red flag, danger, be careful, be careful. Finding trustworthy sources, trustworthy, of information and taking command, I like that, of how you define your experiences are important goals of critical thinkers. Yes. I cannot emphasize this stuff enough. But you must not think of your experience as sacred in any way. True. Instead, consider it one more important dimension of thought that, like all other dimensions, must be critically analyzed and assessed. Failure to do so can lead to bias and self-delusion. Oh boy, oh baby. Yes. We are full of bias. We are full of self-delusion. We are our own worst enemy. We are so delusional so much of the time. It's amazing we can get out of bed or don't trip over ourselves as we move around the world every day, right? Look, more stuff underlined. Let's read it. The mind can take in information in three distinctive ways: by memorizing factoids or inert information. Inert is it just sits there, right? Like a big fat load of bricks, which is not understood well enough to be used by the mind. By misleading or partially learning information, like our Trump fellow, Trump terrorist guy, by misleading or partially learning information or accepting illogical beliefs, which can then leads to activated ignorance. Yeah. So activated, it's like you've activated it. You've become a key component in encouraging and perpetuating your very own ignorance. I'm telling you, we are our own worst enemy. Stop pointing at other people. Maybe other people have put a lot of bad in us. That's no doubt about that. But ultimately, it comes down to us to clean it up. We got to be the janitors of self, right? Clean it up. Get the bucket, get the mop. Let's clean it. 3, by bringing significant ideas accurately into the mind. Look at these keywords, which then leads to activated knowledge. Man, this stuff is good. I don't do drugs. This is the kind of stuff I get high on. I don't do drugs. I don't even drink alcohol. Right? This is the stuff that I get high on. By inert information, we mean taking into the mind information that, though memorized, we do not understand, despite the fact that we think we do. It's inert. It's dormant. It's fat. It's just kind of sitting there plunk, right? We're not really utilizing it to its full effect, right? It's just a lump of clay, a pile of bricks, inert, right? People are generally inert. They won't get out of their own way. Wake up in the morning, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to get up. I don't want to work. Go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. Do homework. I don't want to do homework. Think more thoroughly, honestly, critically, accurately, with great compassion. I don't want to. We are inert by nature. That's every. You've got to fight the inertness. That's a T-shirt, isn't that right? Fight the inert. Often, a good part of the information that they have internalized consists of empty verbal rituals in their mind. Oh my gosh. Many children learn in school that democracy is government of people, by people, for people. Catchy phrase, easily remembered. It leads them to think they understand what it means, although most of them do not translate these words into any particular criteria, right? Um, is this country a democracy? It's of the people and by the people and for the people. But if we didn't have a law, if we didn't have the law of the land, the Constitution, right, we would have problems, right? Because there was the Articles of Confederation, when the colonies were colonies before states, and then you got the Constitution, right, after 1776. Oh, the July 9th, 1776, Congress actually declared us the United States of America, not the United what was it, colonies. Right? And then, of course, we have the Constitution. It went from there. So, we are a constitutional. That's the Constitution. Well, democracy. We are a democracy because it is. We are sovereign. That's true. The people, of the people, by the people, for the people. We are in charge. We are sovereign, right? But it has to be. There has to be laws. So, it's a constitutional republic. What does republic mean, right? What does that mean? Republic means that the power resides in the states. There are certain things that are said at the federal level that the president says that can't be dictated. Think about COVID, right? Remember how each state governor kind of decided what they were going to do in their states? California was different from Texas, different from New York, different from Florida, right? So the power resides in the states, which is the individual. That's where the power resides. So it is a democracy, but our laws are a constitutional republic. How about that? Well, see, I thought it through. A lot more complex than people put it out to be. In short, students often do not significantly think about information they memorize in school. True. Why are you memorizing certain stuff? Why are you memorizing all of the state capital, right? What is the point there? Or memorizing the preamble of the Constitution, or whatever, So what? It's a parlor trick. It's to earn you a few points for your classes, your course. Don't learn. Don't try to focus on learning trivial pursuit, trivial knowledge. That game, Trivial Pursuit, is a lot of fun, but it's all trivial. Learn significant stuff, right? Significant information. Students often do not sufficiently think about information they memorize in school to transform it into something truly meaningful. Critical thinkers try to clear the mind of inert information by recognizing it as such and transforming it through analysis into something meaningful. Thank you very much. All right. Activated ignorance. I love that expression. Isn't that cool? Seems like an oxymoron, doesn't it? Oxymoron. What does that mean? Look it up. By activated ignorance, we mean taking into mind and actively using information that is false, although we think it is true. That's good. I got to use that one. I forgot about that one. Some people believe through activated ignorance that they understand things, events, people, situations they in fact have very little insight into. They act upon their false ideas, illusions, misconceptions, often leading to needless waste, pain, suffering. Do you see why you need this, right? Do you see why critical thinking is so essential to a properly informed, well-lived, rewarding, fulfilling life? Your Honor, I rest my case. Mic drop, right? There it is. It is essential, therefore, that we question our beliefs, especially when acting upon them as significant implications for the harm, injury, or suffering of others. True. You want to have compassion. As a critical thinker, you should. It's not always easy to identify activated ignorance. when it is operating in your minds, right? That's the subconscious stuff. Because it functions at the unconscious, there it is, level. You must keep a clear idea of activated ignorance in the front of your mind and maintain personal vigilance against accepting information that may be false. Ignorance treated as the truth is no trivial matter. That's dangerous stuff, right? And ultimately, it can cause problems, health problems, well-being problems, social problems, confrontational problems. Activated knowledge is, we mean taking into the mind and actively using information that is true. And when understood insightfully, leads us by implication to more and more knowledge and a higher contributions. There you go. Consider a study of history. Many students do know more than memorize, again, right? Just memorizing isolated statements in the history textbook to pass exam. Some of these statements, the ones they don't understand and could not explain, become part of the student's battery of inert information. Other statements, the ones they misunderstand, wrongly explain, become part of the student's battery of activated ignorance. Much of the information, of course, is simply forgotten shortly after the exam. I've had my students read books on history, the whitewashing of history, right? Readers full of essays that explain how historical education at the high school level throughout the United States has been highly misleading and problematic, right? Most historians at the college level, honest ones, will tell you this. This is true, right? Most history is taught to create patriots or people that love their country. There was a lot of stuff done in the early goings of this country, you probably know, I've heard of it, that not good, right? Not good for blacks, not good for the Japanese, not good for Chinese, not good for the Mexicans and so forth, right? A lot of, or women, right? Or Latin women, what the military did to them. So there's a lot of stuff that went on in our early history that we're not to be proud of, you know. So some of that is left out. Should it be gone over, and should we abuse ourselves for doing those things and you know, just continue? Like, it's kind of like the some Christians are into flagellation. You know, they want to be like Christ and just suffer. They just they'll periodically walk around and just whip themselves. That's just crazy, you know. Allegedly, the way it works, if I remember my catechism is that, you know, Christ suffered for us, so we don't have to. But, you know, just to beat yourself up about the ears over and over again, you know, if you fix things, if you've repented, if you will, and things have, you know, have improved considerably, and they've definitely improved considerably over the years. There's a lot of things that have changed over the years. So that's good. So don't just keep beating yourself up for no reason. Right? Much more powerful from a critical thinking perspective is understanding history as historical thinking. You might begin by understanding the basic agenda of historical thinking to construct a story or account of the past that enables people to better understand the present and make rational plans for the future. That's good. Further reflection on the logic of history should lead you to ask questions such as, about what percentage of what actually took place during a historical time period finds its way into any given historical account? This should lead you to discover that for any given historical period, even one as short as a day, incalculable events take place. This is something, history isn't just like one nice, clean timeline, right? There's a whole heck of a lot going on all over the place throughout the world, even in more local places, right? So what is looked at, what is interpreted, how is what is looked at is interpreted. It's complex, right? So there's a lot more going on, and people just want to say, historically, look at this, therefore that. Yeah, no, it's not that easy. Therefore, by implication, there's a lot of disagreement between historians. Therefore, by implication, no historical account can possibly contain more than a tiny percentage of the total events happening within any given historical period. This should lead you to discover that historians must regularly make value judgments to decide what to include and exclude from their accounts. Oh, so true. I mean, we don't think about that, right? We just think it's one, one particular one string or line of events, right? Historically, and it's in a vacuum. Nothing else is going on. Just here's the line of events. Nah. There's a lot more going on. Right? Like Columbus. Did Columbus discover the America? No, he actually discovered the Bahamas. He was going out to discover the Indies, the West Indies. Never even got close, right? And he didn't discover America, North America, or even the Central or South America. He discovered the Bahamas, right? And did he discover this land? Central North America, South America. Did he? No. If you look at history, you can go back to like 12th century when there were boats that came from Finland, Sweden, the Norse people up there. Who was it? Lars? I forget the red beard Viking. Allegedly led some exploration teams out this way to pillage and plunder. Allegedly, they're the first ones. And then in the 13th or 14th century, there were it's been discovered that some came from West Africa and landed, way before Columbus, right? Sailed the ocean blue. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1642. So you can go back, 300-400 years, and this land was already discovered. Right? Or how about this? How about the indigenous tribes people that lived here, who migrated from the African continent way back? If you want to go back in antiquity, they came from, I guess, when there was a landmass that enabled them to do so. They migrated here from Africa, right? Initially, allegedly. And then you had those indigenous people. Didn't they discover America? Weren't they here first? Even before the Vikings came here, or the West Africans, or Columbus? Come on. There you go. That's some honest critical thinking history right there. Activated knowledge, then, is knowledge born of dynamic, seminal ideas that, when applied systemically to common experience, enable us to infer by implication further and further knowledge. Activated knowledge can be fostered in every legitimate human discipline. Oh, so true. Yes. So let's see what else we got. I think we'll end it there. Critical thinkers distinguish between inference and assumption. Well, that's where we'll pick it up. All right. So I've had enough. You probably had enough of me yabbering on, right? So that's it. Until next time, take care.